Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's get started with the top stories this hour. Russia has launched 643 drones and missiles across Ukraine, killing 4 people and wounding over 40 others, according to Ukrainian officials. Meanwhile, Poland has scrambled jets to defend its airspace amidst NATO warnings, while President Vladimir Zelensky has urged for stronger global pressure on Moscow. Israeli tanks have pushed deeper into Gaza City's residential areas, including Sabra, Tel Aviv, Tel Al-Hava, Sheikh Radwan and Al-Nasser. With medics warning dozens of injured people are trapped as Israel denied 73 rescue requests. Gaza health authorities have reported at least 21 Palestinians killed in strikes today. The U.S. State Department has announced it will revoke Colombian President Gustavo Petro's visa after his comments were reported from a pro-Palestinian protest in New York. President Petro has now returned to Bogota, declaring that he does not care, further escalating the situation. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called on all UN member states to immediately implement the restored UN sanctions against Iran. The UN sanctions against Iran have now snapped back into force for the first time since 2015, sending the Iranian rial to a record 1.12 million per the dollar. South Korea and the United States have reached a foreign exchange agreement, according to South Korean Finance Minister Koo Yoon-cheol. The deal is separate from currency swap talks that link to President Trump's tariffs on South Korea, with President Lee Jae-myung stressing that Seoul cannot pay the $350 billion U.S. investment upfront. The U.S. President Donald Trump has now authorized full-force troop deployment to Portland to protect ICE facilities from what he called domestic terrorists. Defined Democratic leaders, including Oregon Governor Tina Kotek and Portland Mayor Keith Wilson, who have denounced the move. Vietnam has now evacuated thousands and has shut airports as Typhoon Bualoy, with winds up to 133 kilometers per hour approaching central regions, expected to make landfall today. The storm followed deadly flooding in the Philippines that killed at least 10 people, prompting urgent precautions. Britain's Labour Party gathers in Liverpool for its annual conference as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces scrutiny over scandals and plummeting poll ratings amidst rising support for Nigel Farage's hard-right Reform UK party. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Rachel Reeves pushes for a post-Brexit youth migration deal with the EU to boost the economy. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has visited a state hospital damaged in a Russian drone attack, calling it one more example of genocide. The hospital was amongst numerous buildings targeted during one of the most sustained assaults on Kyiv since the full-scale war began. Russia launched a massive wave of attacks involving 595 drones and 48 missiles across Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine. Ukrainian air defenses intercepted and shot down 568 drones and 43 missiles. The capital was identified as a primary target. Let's listen into what Vitaly Klitschko, mayor of Kyiv, had to say.
This last attack, one more attack in last night in our hometown. It's 6 districts have damages. A lot of buildings was destroyed. One of them behind me, and in this moment we can talk about 4 people died, and from 4 people it's 12-old girl. 8 people hospitalized and 13 people asking about medical support. We do everything right now to help the people and to fix the problems what we have, and we decide what we do with this building and give the people, for everyone who need help, we support everyone.
We everybody hoped of diplomatic solution, diplomatic way to stop this war. But we see result of discussion. From one side, the Russian Federation talked about just military object is a target for his attack, but we see how many people died, and more than 300 people, I'm talking just about civilians, 300 civilians killed in our hometown from beginning to war, almost 30 children. And it's a tricky game. I don't believe the Russians want to stop this war, because the main goal of Putin to rebuild Russian Empire, and Ukraine is a very important puzzle in his sick vision.
The Russian Defense Ministry has stated that the overnight offensive also targeted Ukrainian military industrial enterprises and military airfield infrastructure, aiming to disrupt the operations of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now, emergency crews have responded quickly to a rocket strike in Kyiv overnight amidst the chaos and destruction. Listen in to a few reactions from a resident who survived the strikes.
Що чули? Ми спали з дітьми, діти були на третьому поверсі, ми на другому з дружиною, і літак збивав ракету, я так розумію. Ну, ми прокинули все перегорнуто, але молюсь Боже, що діти живі, коротше, встигли дістати, це взагалі, просто молюсь Боже. Бо єдиний там на цій стороні, який живий. Ну, діло, що ми все. Просто я досі не можу отямитися, що діти живі, просто така молюсь Божа. Що вони були якраз під дахом, і зачепило, прям зняло старшого сина, прям, я так розумію, зняло прям дах над його ліжком.
Багато солку.
Просто в квартирі було скло, ходили по вкличок у міфані, тому трошки позалазило в інший скло. Нормально.
А що ви чули з головою?
В шоковому стані, такого прям сильно не чули, але довго чули, що летіла ракета, а потім просто вибух і посипав.
Julia Kazdobina, senior fellow Ukrainian PRISM, is joining us live from Kyiv on this story. Julia, what do you make of these latest incidents, these latest attacks? How Ukraine and Kyiv are taking them?
Well, I mean, it's definitely these attacks are definitely taking their toll. People see that these are random attacks, and Russia uses them to actually break the will of Ukrainians, because Russia is failing to win at the battlefield, and its only hope is to break the resistance in the Ukrainian rear. And so, of course, you could see families there who have suffered, but there's also a different side, because there are also people who flock together and who try to help each other to clean up after these attacks and to support each other. And there are cafeteria next to these ruined buildings, which offer people free coffee, free tea, and people also bring and offer clothing, because those whose homes are ruined are usually left without anything. And so it's of course, I mean, nobody is happy about what's happening, and people are increasingly recognizing that the situation is serious, and that the promise of a quick peace that President Trump said when he was running his election campaign, that promise is not coming true, because no matter what he does, Russia continues attacking. So, and I would agree with Kyiv Mayor Klitschko, who said that the goal of Russia is to restore the Russian Empire, and Ukraine is an important piece of that puzzle, and so he's not going to stop unless he is stopped.
Right. Julia, also, if I were to ask you on, these latest, strikes, what have been the targets in this latest assault? Reportedly, a hospital also was targeted, which is something that is being criticized.
A hospital was targeted in the recent days. It was critical energy infrastructure that was targeted, and also railway infrastructure that was targeted. And so Russia is not only of course they do target military targets, that's for sure, but civilian targets are also definitely on the list, because the hospital that was hit today is not located in a district where you would find many military facilities. It's a residential district, so I would assume that the hospital was the goal, and they killed a medical sister and one of the patients, and that's a cardiological hospital, so it's something that provides heart care, and it's a very important facility where actually recently they were able to make a very unique and a very difficult operation that lasted 12 hours, and so Russia targets it. So I guess they're just trying to make sure that we have very little hope.
Okay. Also, Julia, as far as these incidents are concerned, are they then pushing Russia and Ukraine anywhere closer to peace talks or further away?
No, peace talks are happening, and I would even say that what was happening previously wasn't really peace talks. It was Russian President Putin trying to manipulate President Trump into believing that peace was still possible, while at the same time, when the Russian delegation arrived at the talks with the Ukrainian side, there were no meaningful negotiations taking place. So, and although we've seen President Putin claim that he's ready to meet President Trump in Moscow, I think it's the continuation of the same strategy, because President Trump has expressed his displeasure with Putin recently, and so Putin is now trying to charm him back in to make him believe that something is still possible.
All right. In fact, we are getting further updates this hour. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has spoken about President Putin's invitation to American President Donald Trump for their next round of negotiations in Moscow. The invitation was extended by President Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, where the two world leaders met face-to-face for the first time in President Trump's second term in the White House. Peskov has now clarified that despite recent events, the invitation stands, and President Putin is glad and ready to welcome President Trump to Moscow. Julia Kazdobina, Senior Fellow, Ukrainian Prism, is live with us from Kyiv. Julia, as far as talks between President Trump and President Putin are concerned, do we expect another round anytime soon in Moscow?
So far, we have not seen any indication that President Trump is going to meet with Putin again, but Putin is trying to make this meeting happen, because it appears that in personal meetings with Trump, he's capable of manipulating him and convincing him that he is actually about peace, not about war, but his attacks and Russia's behavior indicate the opposite.
Yes, in that context, then, this latest statement from Kremlin, what do you read between the lines into it?
Excuse me?
What do you read in between the lines to this latest statement by Kremlin? They are re-emphasizing the fact that that offer still stands, and that invitation was made in Anchorage itself and has not been taken back.
Well, the invitation, I think at this point, what Putin is trying to do with President Trump, he is trying to replay the results of the Cold War, and so, and he's not able to do it militarily, but he thinks he's able to do it by means of manipulating the American president. And so in Alaska, and Trump indicates that he is willing to talk, he is willing to negotiate, and so Putin just he is not willing to make an agreement, but he is willing to pretend that he is serious about negotiating, which he is not.
All right, I appreciate you joining us, Julia, with your perspective on that story. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has slammed opposition party Reform UK and its leader Nigel Farage at the Labour Party's annual conference in Liverpool, saying that Farage's party wants to, quote-unquote, tear the country apart. Starmer also warned that the UK's national security and defence could be compromised if reform were to align itself with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I love and have pride in my country, and I want to serve the whole of our country, our beautiful, tolerant, diverse country, and I want to serve the whole of that country. And I was arguing against reform because reform do not believe in that country. They want to tear that country apart. What was said last week about deporting migrants who are lawfully here, who've been here for years, working in our hospitals, in our schools, running businesses, our neighbours, and reform say they want to deport them. That would tear our country apart.
Is that immoral
We
in
are
your
at the
view?
moment a leading member of the coalition of the willing, corralling and bringing together European countries to fight the aggression of Putin. Imagine if reform came in and they were cozying up to Putin,
But
and
on
the
that policy
impact that would have,
specifically-
the impact that would have on our security and defence.
Now, Israel has intensified its ground offensive and forced thousands of Palestinians to flee their home as they are unable to find safe refuge. The United Nations World Food Programme estimates that up to 400,000 Palestinians have been displaced since the assault began, while some continue to remain within the city. Let's in fact listen in to what some Palestinians had to say.
يعني معدومة الحياة، معدومة جدا هان، معدومة ما لقيناش مكان. لفيت في كل الجنوب عشان بس الاقي نقطة آمنة اقعد فيها، ما لقيت، فلجأت للمنطقة هذه المعدومة عشان بس أستر حالي وأستر أسرتي وأستر إخواتي وأسرته كمان وأبوي وأمي وأسرتي.
نحاول نمشي شوي صرنا نجري زي هبل. أنا صعب كتير، هنا يعني ما نروح يمكن بالشوارع نرتمي، فيش خيام ولا في إشي، أنا يمكن بالشارع لأن ما عند الله.
Meanwhile, Gazans are searching for survivors after an Israeli strike leveled a 4-story building in the Nusherat camp. Using hammers, they are working to free victims trapped under the rubble. Let's in fact listen in to what was said.
صار انفجار ضخم جدا جدا جدا، انفجار قوي، يعني عمارة 4 طوابق سويت بالأرض، ضرر كبير جدا جدا عند الجيران من هنا ومن هنا. أنا جارهم من هنا، تصاب أولادي كانوا نايمين في الغرفة هذه، وأنا وزوجتي كنا نايمين في الغرفة هذه، لدرجة إن يعني أشلاء الشهداء وصلوا عندنا في الغرفة وإحنا نايمين، وسمعنا صوت صراخ مصابين في الشارع، وانتشروا حوالي 6 شهداء والباقي تحت الأنقاض. لسه عملية الإنقاذ ضايلة لهالحين، بيحاولوا يطلعوا باقي الشهداء من تحت الأنقاض.
Mohammed Usman, International Relations Specialist, is joining us live from Cairo, Egypt. Mohammed, what do you make of these latest sound bites coming in, even as victims in Gaza continue to talk about their plight?
Thank you for having me, Uday. It seems that Israel is carrying on with its brutal ground offensive in Gaza City with the aim of imposing control over the entirety of the city, depopulating it entirely, and basically demolishing it, wiping it off the map. The same thing they did with the city of Rafah down south in the southern part of the Gaza Strip on the border with Egypt. They did the same thing also with the town of Beit Hanun in northern Gaza, and many other cities and towns and villages across Gaza that were completely obliterated and wiped off the map by the Israeli occupation forces. It seems now that Gaza City, the main urban center in Gaza, will face the same fate unless a ceasefire comes into effect within the next few days. Prime Minister Netanyahu is adamant to pursue his absolutist military objectives in his war on the Gaza Strip. He seeks to basically, at least what he announces overtly, is that he wants to topple Hamas and secure the release of the hostages and the detainees. However, also he seeks to depopulate Gaza and remove the population of Gaza from the strip, basically forcing them out, which of course is an act of forced displacement, an act of ethnic cleansing, which is a war crime, as you very well know, Uday.
Do we expect this ground offensive to continue in the next days as well? Is this going to be the prolonged strategy of Israel?
Unfortunately, so it seems. The indications say that Israel has put forward plans to permanently occupy the Gaza Strip and impose security control. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, in his speech at the UN General Assembly, vowed to impose security control over Gaza and install a civil government of his choosing.
Yes.
And of course, this collides with the Trump initiative. There are many reports that are leaking to the press right now that the Americans are putting forward a serious plan to settle the war in Gaza that was presented to Arab and Muslim leaders on the margins of the GA Assembly Summit a few days ago, when President Trump met with the leaders of Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Turkey, and Indonesia, and others, and he pledged to end the Gaza war. And the plan indicates that Israel has to withdraw, the hostages have to be released, and a new transitional government will be imposed on Gaza, which will be led by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, with the participation of members of the Palestinian Authority. And of course, it entails the disarmament of Hamas. The plan is far from perfect. It's not good, but it's definitely better than what the Israelis are proposing, which is basically the resumption of the genocide, Uday.
All right, Mohammed Osman, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. Now, Colombian President Gustavo Petro has condemned the U.S. decision to revoke his visa after he joined a pro-Palestinian protest in New York. The U.S. acted following Petro's call for U.S. soldiers to disobey the President Trump's orders. Petro accused Washington of violating international law by punishing him for criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza. He said he doesn't need a U.S. visa, citing his European citizenship, and called himself a free person. Speaking outside the UN headquarters, Petro called for a global armed force stronger than the U.S. to help liberate Palestinians. Relations between Colombia and the U.S. have been strained, with diplomatic ties cut with Israel in 2024, past threats of sanctions, and both countries recalling ambassadors earlier this year. Tang Rejiang, China's former Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, has been sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve for bribery by a court in Jilin province. Tang was found guilty of accepting cash and property worth over 268 million yuan, or around $37.6 million during his tenure from 2007 to 2024. The Changchun Intermediate People's Court noted that Tang had confessed to his crimes. He was expelled from the Communist Party in November 2024, 6 months after being placed under investigation by China's anti-graft authorities. Tang previously served as governor of Gansu province from 2017 to 2020 before being appointed minister. His swift investigation follows similar probes into former defense ministers Li Shangfu and Wei Fangche amidst President Xi's ongoing campaign to purge China's domestic security apparatus and tackle corruption within the Communist Party. And on that note, it's time for a very short break. Stay tuned to NewsX World.
As the world faces uncertain times,